Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for tuning in to the newest episode of Uncovering the Underground radio podcast show brought to you by my companies Brutal Business Entertainment and Celestial Oddities Radio. I am your host, as always, on this enthralling and encapsulating journey into underground entertainment. I am Reverend Frater Crow, and I want to thank you for listening in tonight. From music to modeling to stars of the screen, from comedy and oddities and everything in between, we bring you a show and episode each and every Thursday night, 8:30 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, interviewing wonderful guests, getting to find out who they are as people, who they are as artists, and allowing you guys to see and hear what it is that they do. We are on episode 13 of season 2, so we're very excited to have been able to give you a dozen episodes so far this season. We do have, if you include tonight's episode, 8 episodes left until we wrap up season 2. So thank you so much for all of your patronage and support. Make sure you click the like, share, and follow button on whatever platform you're listening to us from iTunes to iHeartRadio, Spotify, Deezer, Spreaker, CastBox, Google Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, and absolutely anywhere in between that I might have missed. We air across everything. But by clicking the like, share, and follow button, like I said, it moves us up the podcast community rankings, allows you to, or more people to discover the show, allows you to stay in loop with new episodes as they air, and just really gives you unfiltered access to all of our past archives, which there is something for absolutely everyone, whether it be this show for fans of underground entertainment, whether it be one of our other radio shows like Nights of the Nephilim podcast based on esoteric doctrine, ceremonial magic and ritual magic, and occult and esoteric subjects and matter, or it be Celestial Oddities Pair of Normal Guys podcast, where we talk about supernatural and paranormal phenomena, bring on guests within that field, take on phone calls from around the world of people's experiences that they have had, and much, much more. We are always bringing you great content, great topics. If you've missed our past episodes of this season so far, don't fret, you can jump back at any point in time and listen to them. If you tune in at any point during this radio show and you have missed the beginning, you can always go back after it's over. But please share it around to those that you think would be interested. Last week's guest, we had Sarah Marie Pauley. She is a wonderful model who's done a lot herself in her career as a model, but has also done a lot for other models out there. Her and her husband, Jeremy Lee Pauley, run a very awesome business called the Memento Mori Museum, where they showcase, they travel, they throw events, and teach about osteology, bones, human wet specimens, and things of that nature. Her husband, who was the first guest of the season here on season 2, is the world-leading specialist anthropodermic bibliopagist who, what that means for folks out there that might not know, he is the world's leading specialist in binding books in human skin, as once was done many, many years ago, and is a human wet specimen restoration specialist. So he is in fields that most are not in, and he is a top-notch, representative of those fields. So it's very interesting to get to talk to not only her last week, but to her husband earlier in the season. So make sure you go back and check those out. We've had Angelic Desolation. We have had War. We have had, we've had so many different Cthulhu Dreamt, a lot of great bands and entertainers so far this season, and tonight is certainly no different. I'm very excited to jump into this evening's guest, so I'll tell you a little bit about them, and we can go ahead and jump right into it. Now, joining us for episode 13 is death metal, deathcore band from New Jersey, Nights of Malice. Unleashing a relentless fusion of deathcore and death metal with the precision guitar attack of progressive metal, Nights of Malice was formed in Ocean County, New Jersey in 2009 under the name Tomorrow Never Comes. The group was founded by vocalist James Cook, guitarist Andrew Norris, drummer Joe Capasso, and the trio was joined by guitarist Xavier, and I'm making sure I don't mess this up, Xavier Quiles, I think I said it right, and bassist Pete Irizarry later on. And the band released their first single, The Hindering, in 2014. In summer of 2015, the band recorded a 9-track debut full-length album, Aeonian, at AVI Studios with producer Jesse, I believe it's Avignon, Aeonian earned a potent buzz in the metal circles that it was involved in, enhanced by extensive touring. Their next recording was a self-released EP entitled Our Penance, which launched in 2016, which, along with their hard-working tour schedule, helped get them quite a buzz and traction in the scene. In the meantime, Nights of Malice has passed through a number of lineup changes, as bands often do, with simultaneously working on new material and playing live. With almost 3 years in the works, Nights of Malice returned with their sophomore full-length release entitled Sonnets of Ruin in March of 2019, which saw the guest performances by Thy Art is Murder singer C.J. McMahon and I Killed Everyone's Cody Harmon, with Carson Slavic and Grant McFarland handling mixing and mastering. Preceding the album release were 3 singles, 2 music videos for A Myriad of Misfortunes and Throne of Shame, and a lyric video for Gaia, which features C.J. McMahon. The band has never sounded as fierce or as hard-hitting as they do on Sonnets of Ruin, despite it being their slowest and most atmospheric release yet to date. The instrumentalists have embraced their strengths and honed their instrumental prowess into, as most publications agreed, one of the most unpredictable and ferocious metal albums of the year. Nights of Malice current lineup is Brendan McGrath on vocals, Xavier Quiles and Mark Marin on guitars, Rick Smith on bass, and Joe Capasso on drums. This is definitely the most well-coordinated and solidified the band has sounded to date, and I am happy to bring them on the show. So, as always, folks, spark up a joint, crack open some beers, kick up your feet, and lend me your ears as we dig in together and uncover the underground with New Jersey death metal and deathcore band, Nights of Malice. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Dude, that was a beautiful intro.
Hey, thanks.
Good stuff.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate that. It was a little bit of a lengthier intro, and there was a lot of names in there, and I'm like, oh, man, I'm probably butchering some of these names, but it's okay.
You got the last names like 99% correct.
That's all right. I can't. If anything better than 75, I'm doing good.
Yes.
So if for those out there listening, we do have 2 of the members with us tonight, not all 5. We do have Joe, who is the drummer of the band, and we have Xavier, who is one of the 2 guitarists of the band. So we are, certainly honored to have you on the show tonight. Find out a little bit more about who you guys are as people, as a band, and what is to come from you. Because when I first came across you guys, instantly loved it. I loved the name first off. I clicked on it. I was one of your videos. I loved the video. I started listening to different tracks. I loved the music. It just was a very well-tuned package, and that's what you look for. You don't want a band that looks great but sounds like shit. You don't want one that sounds great but looks like shit. In your guys' case, you had it all. You really had the visuals. A lot of times, unfortunately, a lot of great bands out there have great music. They don't have visuals. They don't have videos. Or if they do, they only have one. You guys have multiple. So I was able to really kind of deep dive into who you guys are, which I often do with anybody I have on the show, and loved everything I've seen. So kudos to you guys.
Yeah, thank you, man.
No, yeah, thanks a lot.
Oh, not a problem.
Yeah, that means the world. Thank you.
Now, obviously, you guys started out with a little bit of a different name, a little bit of a different lineup, which, I mean, as a guy who came from the metal scene, quite a long time ago myself, that's common. I mean, names are going to change. Members certainly change over time. You kind of weed out, and I don't want to say the weak by any means, but you weed out the weak in a way where some people just aren't really meant to work together, or they might not have the same vision or passion that other members have, and you find that more tight lineup. So why don't we start with you, Joe, as one of the original 3? Kind of tell me from the time you started, this project until now, how that's been for you, because obviously it started out as Tomorrow Never Comes, and it's led into Nights of Malice and everything that's transpired over the last few years. Give us kind of a rundown of
that. This is the first band I have ever been a part of. I've been a part of other bands since we started this, but this has been my baby since like high school. We've been doing this over 10 years. And like my first live show I ever played was with this band. So to see where it's come and like that kind of keeps it, hard to say. I don't know. It keeps it personal too, because it's like something I've worked towards since youth, and it's been like an ongoing way for me to gauge my growth since I started playing drum set, really. So at this point, it's like, I don't want to fail myself. So it pushes me to work even that much harder. Initially, yeah, me, Andrew, and James started the band. And then I found Xavier actually on MySpace. He had a bunch of like shred video, look at me shred, and look at this cool guitar solo I made for a contest and stuff. And it turns out he was like the next town over, and I had never heard of him before. So I just messaged him. I was like, yo, you want to jam sometime? And then his mom drove him over to my house, and we hung out and jammed. And that was pretty much history from that point.
That's awesome, though. I mean, sometimes there's a lot of talent nearby. Sometimes we just don't realize it. I mean, you just never know who's a town over, who's 15, 20 minutes away, that's super talented, and until you find them. And that was kind of the case with my band years back. I mean, we had ended up finding a very phenomenal vocalist who went on to be a world famous vocalist, and we were very lucky. He was 5 minutes from my house, so when we lost our vocalist, we're like, what the hell do we do now? And then all of a sudden, this young buck popped up, and he's like, hey, man, I do vocals. And I'm like, are you from the same town as me? He's like, yeah. And he was really young compared to us. And I'm like, all right, send me what you got, not having high hopes. And then he sent me these videos that just blew my mind. And then, the same thing as rest is kind of history from there.
Yeah, I mean, this whole lineup, there's like kind of semi-interesting stories behind everyone that's made it into the band, some more likely than others. Like, if Xavier never made those little like shred videos, I guess 12, 13, 14 years ago now, and I would have never found him, and who knows where I would be. I don't even know if I'd be in a band right now if it weren't for that.
Well, I'm glad you guys certainly found one another and was able to create what you have now, because I don't know what you guys sounded like years back, but I know what you sound like now, and it's very impressive. I mean, you guys have a wonderful sound. It's very polished. Obviously, you guys, as I said, have taken the time and the money and the effort to go to a good studio, have good sound engineers, and that's important because I come across a lot of very talented bands that don't seem the need to put into their product, and that's sad. You think that's kind of like, band 101, but people will be great bands. They're killer live. They have good art. They have all these things, but then you listen to their music, and it sounds like they recorded in their garage, and it's like, why don't you come together and get real recordings? You guys could really open doors for so much more if you just took it a little more seriously. And it sounds silly, but so many bands, for some reason, either don't think of that or they just won't do it. For some reason, that's their block.
That's 100% true.
And it's weird to me. I've come across so many. I'm like, it's really, I mean, I know it's expensive, guys, but think of it. There's 5 of you. If you each pitch, $400, that's going to add up quick. You can at least get a demo out or at least get something good. Oh, I don't know, man. I mean, we're kind of happy with what we're doing now. Yeah. It's like, all right, man, well, in 5 years from now when you're not a band anymore because you stopped playing the same 4 places that you have played, you could have done so much more. And it's strange, the roadblocks that we set for ourselves.
So that's funny. It's crazy. Well, it's funny that you brought up recording. It's, I guess, a good segue because, the Jesse Avignon that you mentioned about Ionian, I went to vocational school with him, and so we were kind of like friends, and we had we just like kind of jammed together a little bit. So he gave us like kind of like a deal or whatever on our first like full length, and then after that, Carson brought up or Joe brought up Carson and Grant, and for our Penance EP, and the first time we heard the price, yeah, we kind of were like, oh my fucking, like, how are we gonna afford this? But now it's just like, oh, okay, studio time with Carson and Grant again, let's get the money. You know what I mean? Like, that could be like a red flag for people when they realize how much money you really have to spend. But it's so worth it, man. Like the production and everything, like you said, it opens so many creative doors, and they help good production helps elevate your band like so much more than anybody realizes until they're there.
It's just strange because, I mean, you'll have people that are like, we're really a serious band and we want to go on and do big things. I'm like, well, when are you guys going to go to a real studio? Oh, I don't know. I'm like, well, that right there is going to stop you from every dream that you've ever had. I'm like, that is the first step that you need to get in. I mean, even before music videos, obviously, because you want to have professional quality for the video. But I mean, before you get the album or the EP out or the artwork or anything, go ahead and play some live shows, get yourself attuned to one another, grow as a group, but then get to the studio. After the studio, get the music videos, get the artwork for the album, get the money gathered together to maybe get a professional marketing or promo run so you gain more fans that way. But without the sound quality, I mean, it's so simple, but like if you're a band, your point is you make music. If you don't make good music, then what is the point? So it's just it just sounds so strange.
Common way people find you is like, yeah, dude, you could be sick live and you could be, you could have a sick video or whatever, but like whenever anybody hears your band, like hears of you, your music and your spot, like people have to listen to your audio music first. So you want that to be, that's I think the most important.
Well, how was that? I mean,
like
your guys.
I'm sorry, a good handshake almost, Well,
that's it. I mean, do you take someone serious who doesn't? Yeah, I mean, that's what it is like you came, you look like a really cool guy, you dress really nice, you have a great attitude, and then I shake your hand and you give me that fucking limp fish hand. I can't really respect you after that. You don't get it back. That was your one shot. So it's like you never know who's in the crowd watching you. And sometimes there are important names out there watching you that might be looking for that next talent to really try to help put on. And you give a wonderful performance. They write your name down in their little black book and they say, you know what, I'm going to look up these guys tonight. And if their music's as good as what I heard tonight live, I'm going to give them a huge opportunity. Then they look up your music and they hear it and it sounds like you recorded on Audacity in your attic. Yeah. And then they're like, I'm never calling these guys again. Instantly X'd in the book. And you don't know who they're talking to. And that's the thing is people don't think about that. But there's A&Rs out there sometimes watching.
The standard nowadays is so ridiculous that like there's so many audio snobs and mixing and mastering and all these classes and shit like that like normies that aren't even that involved in music are so interested in, like, you have to sound good. And like the tools and technology is so there that you could just, if you wanted to spend the money, you could just learn and do it yourself. Like I think there's like no excuse to, at least if you want to be serious, like try to at least have a good sounding mix.
Well, I'm glad you said that because that actually leads me into a very important, segue that I do in a lot of the shows, which is, modern technology. Because whenever I started out as a band quite a while back, there wasn't home studios for the most part. There were a few people we knew of that had home studios. Yeah. Very few, just a couple. And the people who did were kids who were usually well off, that they kind of grew up in money, so they had the money to have these fancy computers and studio equipment, whereas that really wasn't the norm. You had to go to an actual studio, and that was really expensive. And the first time my band had ever recorded, we were a bunch of teenagers, and we showed up to this professional studio, and this guy's taking us into sound rooms. We had no idea what we were doing. It came out to be a cute EP, but it was cute because it wasn't what it could have been. It was like we just didn't have any clue what the hell we were doing, and burn up our amount of money that we had very quickly. So what we expected to be like 6 songs ended up being, I think, like 2. And, we kind of built from there. But, over the next several years and over the next 2 decades, it became the norm that now the price dropped down as it became more available. The quality went up. It wasn't unheard of to know someone that had, had a program that they could record you with, and it started learning. YouTube became much bigger. Videos started coming out to teach you how to do it yourself. Then there started being teachers that would say, take my course and I'll teach you how to be an audio engineer. And it changed the game. And I mean, if you're not going to go to the studio, some people don't need to, but if you're not going to, then learn how to do it yourself, because there are bands, and I've interviewed many on this show, that they say, oh, we don't go to the studio. And I'm like, you did that all yourself. Oh, yeah, we did everything you've heard all in-house. And some of it's phenomenal material. And I'm like, see, that's awesome. Did not have to spend $1 just to really bust your ass, though, on the studio. That's a game changer. So, I mean, as you said, if you're not going to go to the studio, you better learn to be the studio.
That's our friend Mike Kelly.
There's so much to compete with too out there now. Like there's so many bands with great records and great visuals and everything. It's like if you don't make that great first impression and you don't think it's worth it to at least either invest money or at least your time and effort into creating the best possible thing you can put out in front of people nowadays, I mean, it's just going to be like blowing dust off the shelf because there's so many other bands behind you that are hungry and aggressive and like know how to make something cool and memorable.
Well, and it's changed with the technicality aspect as well, because recording 15, 20 years ago compared to now, listen to death metal back then to now. I'm not saying that the instrumentals haven't certainly remained consistent in technicality, but the recording technicality, the breaks, the time signatures, we're able to do things now with our music that really wasn't possible or easily possible back then. And with the different plugins and different effects that we can add now that wasn't available years back, bands are just sounding insane. You listen to new albums. I listen to, usually every night I go to bed and listen to one death metal album every single night. I fall asleep listening to one with earbuds in. And, you know, I find a lot of great ones. I find a lot of bad ones. But some of the shit that I hear from bands I've never even heard of that I'm like, what the fuck are these guys on? Like, what did they do in the studio with their time? Because, I mean, some of the parts that I'm hearing is just, it just shatters my mind. And that was not something you heard growing up listening to death metal and listening to, you know, Venom and listening to, you know, all these other bands that were great, but they weren't, you know, the things that I'm hearing now, like what the hell is the name of that one band I've been listening to lately? Vulvodynia.
Mm-hmm. Oh, dude, they're sick.
Like, what the fuck is that, man? I'm listening to these guys. I'm like, what?
To Humanity's Last Breath.
The name sounds familiar. I don't know if I've listened to them or not, but I deep dive into so much, man. I can't even keep track of it anymore.
The mix just sound like the mixing that they do. It's like it fucking can shatter your. It sounds like thunderous. It sounds unearthly.
And that's what it is like death metal is. So it was weird. We went through a stage. Back when my band was around, there was still good death metal. It was like it went through pockets. It built up and then it dropped off. And for a while, there really wasn't a whole lot, or what I felt, it was kind of stagnancy. Where for a few years, you know, a handful of years, there were some good bands, but most of it, I'm just like, it's all the same. It all sucks. And then all of a sudden, something happened. I mean, I'm saying within like the last 6-7 years, something tremendous has happened. I don't know where all these bands have come from, but now I can literally pull out 50, 60 death metal bands that are just on point and phenomenal. Yes. It's like an endless stream, whereas once upon a time, I had to sift through 60 bands to find a good one. Now it's hard for me to find a really shitty one when I'm listening to a lot of the bands I'm listening to. So I think that's a big part of this home studio.
There's a lot less like purist type bands too. Like, yeah, there are a lot of like purist mindset, like music, you know, writing that happens with some bands. But in general, I mean, there's such an amalgamation of styles and influences and stuff that have all blended together over the years that, like, there's no clear-cut subgenres anymore like there was in 2008. Like, when you could scroll down on MySpace and pick from all the stupid different, like, subgenres that your band was or whatever. Like, there's so many. Every band has 5 different influences,
yes,
at least, that are highly visible nowadays, because firstly, music is more available, and secondly, it's just had time to grow and evolve. And yeah, I know what you mean. There was like a stagnant period in heavy music where it was kind of just like no one's reinventing anything. But then I don't know. I know what you're saying. I mean, it's a lot more expressive now in different ways than it was before. People aren't putting up such hard walls and like hard borders as to like what this can and can't be and needs to be.
That's an important thing there, because I think that was it. Is for a while we breached this canyon where we reached it and things were changing, and there was a lot of people stuck in old ways. They're like, I don't want this change happening. This is bullshit. And there was people wanting the change. So there was kind of like that civil war between, you know, different sides of death metal and metal. And then it started to seep into a lot of the people who were naysayers. They're like, well, actually, this could be dope. And it started to kind of change, and bands started to not look at those hard borders anymore. And like you said, I have to be a purist. I have to be Cannibal Corpse death metal. Well, what if I'm not? What if I'm able to add in new elements of things no one would think of? What if I can be experimental with my metal or my music and change the game?
You make it that much more intense, and you can still love those influences.
Oh, absolutely, all day. I mean, that's what makes us into who we are. But it's okay to be different. And for a while, it wasn't. It was like, oh man, why can't they just keep the course, keep on course? And then it was like all of a sudden it became okay. And I think that's where that burst happened. Like it was stagnant for a while, and then poop, it popped. And now there's just floods of all kinds of fucking badass bands like the Dialectic and all these bands that when you hear them, you're just like, wow, man. Like, or like, what the hell is the one band? I've been listening to a lot of them lately. Not Annotations of an Autopsy, but the other Autopsy band.
Fit for an Autopsy?
Yeah, them fucking dudes are dope as shit too.
Oh, dude, we all love Fit for an Autopsy. That's one of the big universal influences of our band. They're so fucking good, man.
Oh, they're real good, man.
I mean, influence in some of our songs.
Yeah.
And that's, you guys are dope. You guys are right there, man. I mean, I listen to your music and I'm like, these guys are fucking phenomenal. I mean, it was one of the bands that out of the whole season this season too, that I'm most excited to get to sit down and chill with tonight and get to showcase to the people, because you guys are phenomenal at what you do and you got so much more left, and I can't wait to see what you guys grow into from here and what you've already done. So, actually a good point to jump into the first song and segue into that. So right now I have 3 options, and Joe, I'm going to jump to you for this first one since you are the original with the band. You tell me. I have A Myriad of Misfortunes, I have No Quarter Given, and I have Voidbringer.
Voidbearer.
Oh, I thought I wrote down Voidbringer. I don't know where I got that from.
That's all good. I would probably hit a Voidbearer.
Let's get it. You can finish. You go ahead. I'm sorry.
I know it's all good. That's a cool one. That's definitely our proudest visual production, I think, and it's the first really big statement that Mark made with the orchestrals. So Mark came into the band and he was the only person that knew how to use a DAW and use plugins for any of that kind of stuff, really. And he went balls to the wall on the orchestra stuff, and he has a lot of influence from film score and things like that, like Nightmare Before Christmas and all that. So I think this was the first time he really got to shine. So you'll hear it in the intro of the song and throughout some of the other songs too, but this is his magnum opus of orchestra, especially in the intro.
Yeah.
Well, perfect. Let's jump into it and let the folks hear it. This is Voidbearer, and this is Nights of Malice here on Uncovering the Underground. We'll be right back after this. All right, folks, we are back on Uncovering the Underground radio show, and that song was Void Bear, and that was by New Jersey death metal and deathcore band Nights of Malice. We've been hanging out with these guys for the last 35 minutes, roughly, talking about some of the changes in the scene as far as recording equipment and the availability of being able to record at home versus recording in a studio, how sound is such an important thing, you know, for any band, but especially in the metal scene. I mean, people get away with just making a lot of noise, but, you know, until I can hear that your noise has substance, it's hard for me to follow you. So, you know, recording is a must. And we've been talking about how these guys started out, where they're leading to, where they're at now, and we have so much more to unpackage this evening. So, great song, guys. I love how you said that, you know, Mark got a chance to really unpack on this song with, you know, his bringing the orchestral feel to it, and it has that to the song. So that's awesome when bands can do that. I just had a band on 2 shows ago. They're called Cthulhu Dreamt, and they're very orchestral, and they're a mix of like Dream Theater / Tool / symphonic mindfuckery, and they're really good. Very trippy and very far out there, but I mean, they use a lot of that in their music, and when you're listening to it, you're like, wow. I mean, it takes it so much more than just a band. I mean, it starts to bring in all these elements that can really, it's endless what you can do with it.
Yeah, dude. I mean, so we experimented with that orchestral shit a little bit, like way back in the day on like our Penance and stuff prior to Mark. Like that, we have that song Sin Incarnate where we did it on a little bit, but the issue was that we had to kind of like hum what we were thinking and the producer would make it. So it's nice that now Mark, you know, he himself knows how to write these things. And ever since then, on all the newer songs from here on out, you're going to hear so much more of that than just like, you know, a one-off experimental idea like on Sin Incarnate. Like I think that is like a staying like factor in our band going forward.
It's nice to have the option. I mean, you don't have to do it all the time, but you can do it anytime you want now, and that's nice, is to always have that tool in the toolbox if and when you want to pull it out, whether that is every track or whether that's once an album. Doesn't matter. You have the tool to be able to do it now.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, you know, why don't you tell us a little bit of the experience on, you know, this past album where you've gotten to work with some pretty big bands, some pretty big names and vocalists, you know. I'll jump into you, Xavier. I mean, how was that to know that you have, you know, some headliners being a part of your album? How did that feel?
Oh, dude, it was awesome. Was like, I messaged CJ from Die Art and he answered me right away, which was super cool. The guy's cool as hell. And then Cody, he actually we recorded in Pennsylvania, and he lived about an hour from the studio. So he insisted on coming and doing it in person. I thought we were going to have to send him the songs, but he literally came and hung out for the night, and he killed it. He fucking destroyed it. It was crazy watching those sounds come out of this dude. So, yeah, man, it was fun. It just felt like when we were doing that whole album, every element of it just felt like next level, like we were really growing. This felt like a new milestone in like every regard.
Well, I love that you said that, because, I mean, that's another thing that's changed over time is death metal vocals. Now, not only has instrumentation changed, recording and technology changed, the availability of being able to do more and even adding symphonic sounds in, and like we talked about, or orchestral sounds, vocalists. I mean, if you go back to death metal once upon a time, early Cannibal Corpse days, like I said, I still love, you know, Corpse Grinder and the shit that he does, but the thing is, it changed, and there's some vocalists coming out now that you see, and that was what happened with our vocalist, and you guys probably wouldn't know, but the vocalist of my band went on to become the vocalist of Rings of Saturn.
Oh, shit.
And, you know, when we came across Ian, it was this, like, 17-year-old kid. He weighed, like, 105 pounds wet. He was like 7 years younger than us, so like when he reached out to me, I'm like, all right, give me a fucking break. And then he sends me these videos, and I'm like, what the fuck did I just listen to? Wow. And then for the longest time, and this is no knock against Ian by any means, he's still a prodigy at what he does. But I mean, I was like, I've never heard anybody do death metal vocals like this kid. Now that has become, I don't want to say par for the course because it's a specialty and it takes a shit ton of work. I'm just saying that there are so many phenomenal death metal vocalists now. There's still a lot of crappy ones, but I mean, there's a lot that I come across and I'm like, wow, this 15 years ago was not a possibility. And that is because of the fact of advances in technology. And it's because of the fact that there is YouTube and things like that where you can go on and watch the proper ways of learning how to do vocals so you don't tear your vocal cords. You can go on and learn lessons from people where when we started out, we just started screaming. You know what I mean? We were like, we're going to do death metal vocals. You know, like we didn't know what the hell we were doing. We were tearing all kinds of stuff up. So, I mean, one band that comes to mind, I don't know if you guys listen to, but it's one of my favorite bands, is Enterprise Earth.
Nice.
And you look at this vocalist, and he's like 80 pounds, you know what I mean? He looks skinny as hell, kind of an emo-looking kid, and then he comes on and just fucking destroys it, and you're like, wow. Like, all right, wasn't expecting that, and I love that now. Not that I ever was one to try to read a book by its cover, it's just, there's just so much more availability, so... your guys' singer looks brutal, so you can't say that for your guys. I look at your fucking ginger singer, and he just looks like he's ready to kill people.
Gigantic Brandon. He's like a Viking.
He looks like a Viking. Like, that's one of the pills that you guys had. Is like I said, I seen the name. I'm like, Nights of Malice. That's a fucking badass name. Seen some of the titles of the tracks. I'm like, all right, I'm digging it. Some dark, gloomy type, vibes of some of the names on the tracks. And I watched that video. As I said, I can't remember which video I watched, but I watched one of the videos, and I'm like, oh wow, these guys are really dope. And I'm just looking at this Viking-looking motherfucker, and I'm like, man, this dude looks like he's ready to go to war. I mean, it made me want to go put on my Sunday best, go to my neighbor's house and knock on their door, and when they walk out, just suplex them through their front stairs. And if it does that to me, I'm like, this is my shit. And that's what it did. So, I mean, kudos to you. Luckily, my neighbor's still living, but, barely. You guys almost got me arrested.
No, it's funny you say that because he loves also like that, like the Norway vibe and shows with Vikings and shit like that. Like he loves that aesthetic, like Game of Thrones. He looks like people who are in Game of Thrones, and he revels in it, dude.
He does, and I mean that's what caught me. Like I said, as soon as I seen the guy, I'm like, this dude looks like he's ready to go to fucking war, and I wanted to go to war with him. I'm like, he made me feel like I'm ready to go to battle.
But yeah, dude, that vocalist thing you were talking about, I just like. That is one thing I've always like wondered about, because like with guitar and with drums and everything, like people could always get better in technology and recording, plugins and software. Like it helps you advance yourself, plus like hours of practice a day. But like with vocalists, I don't understand how vocalists are just like, this is an internal thing that they are just always better at. I feel like some of them are just freaks of nature, dude. Like they just have it. Like Alex from Slaughter to Prevail, that dude is a fucking. He just sounds like a missing link or something.
Yeah, very, very animalistic, demonic. I mean, some of his growls are very different. Their sound is different. And that's what that was so weird is, I mean, like you said, when you hear guitar being taken to the next level, that's understandable. Even though it's amazing, it's understandable.
Yeah.
But when you hear vocalists doing what they're doing now compared to 10 years ago or even 7 years ago, you're like, what is happening? I mean, this isn't.
It's not like they're doing sit-ups with like their lungs, like they're like feeding their lungs steroids. They're like,
when Phil Bosman first came out, when Whitechapel first hit the scene.
Oh, dude, totally.
I was like, okay, what the fuck is this? I mean, instantly, the very first seconds of the very first song that I heard, I'm like, oh, game changer.
Yeah, I really think that guy changed it. Him and like Mitch Slucker and everybody, like they set like a standard, man. Phil Bozeman is a legend.
The three that really stuck out to me, yes, you just named it, was Mitch from Suicide Silence, was Eddie, who was the singer of All Shall Perish at the time,
dude.
And was Phil Bosman. The three bands came out around the same time. All three vocalists were phenomenal, and the bands were phenomenal. And I mean, it just changed it. I think every kid aspiring to be a great band looked up to these bands, especially vocalists, and realized that if I don't step up to this, Who's going to even care? Because this is the new wave. And that's what followed. After that, every band, all of a sudden, all these young kids. And I think that was because it had to be taken over from a new generation. You had the vocalists who had been doing this for years. They couldn't, for the most part, go back to go forward. But you had kids just getting into it, and they're like, oh, I can learn from the get-go how to be a Phil Bosman, where people that have already been screaming for 8 years, they're like, fuck me. there was no going back.
It's like the new generation is like hungry to push the limits, like as always, but they already had a cool baseline, and now that generation is the baseline. So like that's why I think it's more and more common to see stuff that's so extreme that like we're starting at unimaginable. Where is it going from here?
And I think that's needed. And I talk a lot about how I think progression, sounds horrible saying this, but how I think progression can be actually a very bad thing in a lot of cases. This is not one of them tonight, folks. So if you hear me rant a lot and bitch about a lot of things, this is one of the times I'm not bitching, because growing up in high school, there was a lot of great bands I listened to. But, when you listen to, Cannibal Corpse, as I mentioned several times tonight, when you listen to, Death, when you listen to a lot of these bands that were great, I'm not saying they don't hold a candle to the new bands, but they don't. I mean, here's the thing. The technicality is usually, in most cases, more technical instrumental-wise. The vocals just really do it for me, because a lot of times, even in the old death metal, I loved it, but I'm like, there really wasn't a lot of range. Now you got people with just brutal guttural lows to pterodactyl highs that actually are hitting it at the right pitch, and it's not just chaos, and it's really well presented, and that's the progress. And I'm like, okay, so it'll stay at this amazing level for a while, but then now the next generation is going to have to figure out, how do you go beyond that? And that's what I'm curious to see. Now, where do you take it from here? How do you get more technical? How do you open that new chapter? And that's what I don't know.
Yeah, dude. I also I have so many favorite albums out there, but I feel like it's really hard to be like timeless. Like, if you listen back to some of that shit decades ago, it's still like great, like you said, but I mean, like, to really have a timeless, you can listen to it by today's standards and it still rules. There's really not like that many albums I could name. There's some, dude, but it's hard to keep up with everything just constantly changing.
Yeah, it's a constant, change, and that's what I talk a lot about it, because I've watched metal really, switch over the years, and this is something I'll bring up now, and you guys can give me your input on it. I mean, obviously, CDs became very big. CDs were everywhere. There was no MP3, and then MP3 came out, and it really changed things up. Not at first. I mean, a lot of people really weren't, didn't have MP3 players or iPods at first. But then, obviously with Napster and with LimeWire and these other sources, people really started downloading. It became big. And then it started to take over where, people were selling just download cards at their merch tables. And then CDs now have kind of just phased out, where it's almost an inconvenience to have a CD. My car doesn't have a CD player anymore. Right?
Yeah, me neither.
You know what I mean? So you can't even play a CD. I got fucking hundreds of CDs in my basement and booklets that I don't even take with me, which is a convenience, because I don't have to lug that shit around and dig through CDs. So it is nice to just be able to put on my Amazon Prime or my Amazon Music and have any album I've ever wanted at my fingertips. So that is beautiful. But to what end? And you start to look at, like, I've said often, I miss the days of going. Well, I miss going to buying an album.
Yes.
Dude, album artwork is like one of the biggest connections I have with music, and it's like a lost art at this point. Like,
yes.
Yeah, you see it on your phone or whatever, but like the magic of opening that, like looking at that booklet and like touching it and like
the smell,
smelling the paper, like when you open it the first time, it's like, I sound like an old guy, but really it's like the amount of care that went into the visual arts that accompany the album. Because like originally when you bought music, you just went into a record store, and the easiest way to win new fans was have striking album artwork.
Yes.
Now it's, how many people heard about you online, and you don't really need sick artwork to do that anymore, but it's such like a whole different medium, and like it's a look into like the visuals in the mind of the artist when they're writing the music and stuff, and music videos capture that too. But I don't know, there's just something about album artwork that was always...
It's the missing link now. I've talked about this multiple times on the show. You guys wouldn't know that, but I mean, one of the things that I've said about is as a teenager, I mowed neighbors' yards, I shoveled sidewalks, I did odd end things to make that allowance to be able to go to the local, it was called On Cue, then it became Sam Goody and FYI and FYE and all these other places. But I would go there with the intent of buying, let's say 3 albums or 5 albums if I was really having a good week or a couple weeks. And I would go in and buy 1 or 2 that I've had my eye set on, that I needed those 2 albums. But then I would buy 1 or 2 or 3 that I've never heard of, and it was strictly by the artwork. I would look through the metal section, find a band that I'd never heard of before. I'm like, who are these guys? Look at that artwork. And then the peeling of those little fucking stickers that would never peel off right, and they'd fuck your album case up.
Dude, the first album I ever got was like that. It was As I Lay Dying. I just thought it looked cool, and I was like, I was one of the first. And I was at Coconuts with my mom. I was like, Mom, this looks cool. Can I please have this? And another thing with albums too, dude, one of my favorite things to do when I was a little kid is to just like the lyrics. I used to love reading the lyrics to every song front to back on albums. And I mean, I guess
when you'd open the lyric booklet and it was a fucking poster.
Yeah, you'd get the rare poster in it.
Ever happened.
I like the thank you sections. I loved reading who the band thanked or the weird things that some of the bands would say in the thank you section.
Yeah,
there used to be like an entire page.
God, we sound so fucking old.
Here's the thing. I mean, that was the beauty of it. Now, I mean, I get it. You can just look it up on your phone. So in one way, it is very nice. But the other way is it's lacking, because I feel that did something to a kid's mind when you had to go out and work your ass off to get the money, to get the ride to the store, to go in and look at these albums and just be awestruck of hundreds of albums and the possibilities. And to know that you were going to buy it, and that weekend you were going to put your headphones on, you were going to plug into your big ass, CD player or your little Walkman, and you were going to listen to this album front to back, back to front 5-6 times, and explore something new and open up new doorways in your mind, because there wasn't just endless albums. You had the albums you've already previously heard, and now you had this new album, so you better appreciate it. Now we can't appreciate music.
The fact that it was that much of a process to get to that point of listening to it, checking out the artwork, aided in like the imaginative like experience of experiencing the album itself too, because it's like, I bought this and it took me this much, like, let me really kind of see what they did with it. And it just, I don't know.
Well, I mean, think of it this way. It's the enjoying the journey up the mountain as much as the view of the top of the mountain, where now you can press a button and instantly be transported to the mountain. So you look around and you're like, this is cool. Then you hit the button and you're gone. But if you hiked up the mountain and you spent hours busting your ass to get there, you're going to stand at the top of the mountain even longer. You're going to appreciate it even more. And then you're going to have to walk back down it. And that's how the CDs were. It wasn't everything at the click of a button and on demand, because I know that I've already listened to the 40 CDs that I owned. So even if I didn't like this album the first listen, I would listen to it again and again to try to see, do I just truly not like it, or is maybe I didn't like it the first time? And sometimes that second or third listen, I'd be like, oh my God, this album's amazing. I just didn't get it at first. Whereas now you listen to 2 songs, fuck this band, and you're on to the next one and on to the next one, and on, because it's all just a click of a button. Bloop, bloop, bloop. No more money. There's no journey.
You don't create a palette either. Like, I mean, I guess it's kind of like fine dining or whatever, but you don't have like any kind of like refined musical palette. You you know what you want and you know what to type in to get it right away.
Yes.
You don't have to like take the journey to get there.
It's sad,
When there's a
man.
band I still really like, I'll purposely like if I have the money, Black Dahlia Murder or something like that, I'll still pre-order just for that, to have the disc and shit, just for the old school vibe, I guess.
Well, that was
There's
one of the
some-
bands right there, but I didn't know much. It was one of their very first albums, and I was like, the Black Dahlia Murder. And I actually, most people find out about the actual crime, the Black Dahlia, from the band, where I was opposite. I knew about the Black Dahlia Murder and studied crime and things when I was younger, and I came across one of their albums, and I'm like, all right, it's a pretty cool name. Album artwork was awesome.
Yes.
I brought it home and plugged it in, and I was like, excuse me, I was about to choke myself out. I came home and plugged it in and instantly was like, wow, who the fuck are these guys? And fell in love. And to this day, Black Dahlia Murder is one of my absolute favorite bands ever. So,
same, absolutely same. I think for basically all of us as a band, they're like probably our biggest like influence mutually. Like all five of us, I think, have a huge respect for them.
they're a fun band. I mean, even if you watch their documentary or like their on tour videos and stuff, just fun band. They've always had fun together. They've kept it fun.
Yeah, dude.
And that's what it's about. I mean, he'd come out in Hawaiian shorts, you know what I mean? You look at this guy, and you're like, this guy's not going to sing any good death metal, and then he kicks in, and you're like, what the fuck?
Their musicality is fucking nuts.
Phenomenal.
They riff, they go crazy, but they're all just like goofball stoners who joke.
Yeah, the down to earth element, it's like they're so far out of like reach as far as players, but the fact that they're so just like down to earth dudes and like you feel like this is just a guy that I would hang out with, it's so much more easy to fall in love with what they're doing because you feel like you can relate to them even though they're doing these things that are like, how's that even possible?
That Darkest Hour did that for me as well. I'm a huge Darkest Hour fan, and
Dude.
they're just really chill, stonerish type, have fun on tour, just regular everyday Joes. So when you look at these average motherfuckers, you're like, man, are these dudes, and if you don't know them, I mean, you look at them and like, are these guys any good? And then they kick in and they're just phenomenal, and you're like, wow, okay. Some bands you come out, they all look like metal guys. So sometimes you have bands that come out and you look at them and you're like, oh, wow, we're in for it. Whether they're good or not, the look is there. Some bands don't need that look. They come out and they actually get away with the fact that they don't have the look. It makes them look even better by not having the look.
Hell yeah.
That's like Burns Red.
What was that?
What?
August Burns Red is like the poster child for that. Like, we don't look metal at all, but we definitely are.
You know what's weird about them?
ass.
I don't know if you guys, if you've seen them live before, you have to pay attention before they start, but their singer, he comes out every show with a bottle of alcohol, like not like drinking alcohol, like rubbing alcohol, isopropyl alcohol, and he has a rag, and he dumps it on the rag, and he wipes down the entire microphone and sterilizes it.
Oh, shit.
And that's game changer right there. The first time I watched August Burn Red and I watched him come out and do that, I'm like, did this dude just sterilize the microphone? And sure enough, he did. And I'm like, you know what? That's actually genius because the last dude was like rubbing it on his sweaty ass body and he's spitting on it and like swallowing it and shit.
Oh, yeah. G.G. Allen throwing like shit at the audience.
Yeah.
And then this motherfucker comes out in like a polo sweater and he's like sterilizing the microphone, looking like a complete jock nerd.
Oh my God. Imagine being the guy who used the mic who G.G. Allen opened for, and he's like, oh, so I guess this is the only mic you guys have. I have to still use it. He just wipes his ass with it and shit.
Yeah, I'd just cancel, man. And honestly, you'd be up after him if you never seen G.G. Allen and you seen what he did. I'd be like, yeah, we're gonna fall off the show tonight. But you're already here. But like, no, we're good, man. We're good.
Yeah,
we're out.
We're instrumental tonight.
Yeah, no vocals tonight because he just threw a big handful of shit across the room on his fans and.
Then grabbed and then cupped the mic with his hands.
Yep, and then like cracked one of the dudes. The one show he cracked the dude in the face with a microphone and split his head open and then grabbed the dude's chick and like started making out with her.
Jesus Christ, man.
And I'm like
butt naked in a dog collar, like covered in shit.
That dude is a barbarian.
Yeah, he was something. I mean, I never been a big fan, but I'll tell you what, if you're in for the shock and awe, he certainly brought it.
He has an audience somewhere, man.
Somebody likes him. His name's still being circulated on the show
circle
tonight.
I never want to be a part of.
Yeah, not my thing, man. I'll go to a concert without the shit getting thrown on me.
Yeah.
Bring the isopropyl alcohol with me.
But yeah, for real though, I mean, real quick before we jump into the second song break, I've seen hundreds and hundreds of bands in my lifetime and performed with hundreds of bands. I have never, ever seen someone bring out 70% isopropyl alcohol and be like, I'm wiping and sterilizing everything down before we play. And it's genius. I'm not knocking on a guy. I'm like, that's a smart motherfucker right there. He's the only person I've ever seen do it. And the first time I seen August Burns Red, I got to be honest, I didn't know who they were. They were opening up, I forget who the hell they were opening up for. It was like, Devil Driver or someone like that. And I was there for Devil Driver, and then they came out, and I'm like, look at this fucking nerd. I'm like, he's wiping down the mic, but then at the same time, I'm kind of like, that's actually genius. But I was still kind of being a prick, and I'm like, yeah, look at these nerds. And then they came on and started playing, and I'm like, oh, wow. I'm like, the time signatures that these guys are doing is a little bizarre. And then I started listening a little bit more, and I'm like, no, I'm absolutely in love with these guys.
Yeah, I love that band so much.
There was a bunch of good bands back then when they came out. Devil Driver came out. They came out. There was a band called A Dozen Furies. Phenomenal band. They put one album out. It's great. And then they just disappeared. I don't know what the hell happened to them. There was just one amazing, phenomenal album and then just poof, gone.
There's so many bands like that. I could pull up my library and look at stuff.
Oh, Demise of Eros was another one that comes to mind. I seen them. They were a very small local band from here in Pittsburgh. They got a chance to get big. They signed. They went on one tour. They released their one album, and then no one ever heard from them again. Once Nothing, another phenomenal
It's like a band like the candle that burned hot and fast.
Yeah, they came out. They gave a great first tour, great first album. Everybody loved them, and then they're like, good night.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, what the fuck internally happened?
Yeah, something big. I mean, I think that's just really... Well, I think that's just going on tour with your brothers that you think are your brothers, and you find out very quickly you just fucking hate them.
Well, I was going to just say that, what I honestly think a lot of it is for some people, nowadays, studio projects are such a big thing, but I feel like a lot of people, be in a band full time and want to do this and that, but dude, touring and playing shows every night and stuff, it can be so, taxing and fatiguing that I think they do it once and they're like, fuck this. I don't like this lifestyle of sleeping in a van and having $5 for food a day. Stuff like that. I can understand them, saying fuck this really quick.
And we've talked about that on the shows. I mean, you will learn very quickly if you don't already know when you start touring that, I mean, if you're either going to love the guys you're with and find a new profound respect for them, even though you will have moments that you hate them, or you will just end up actually hating them. And it's not either direction. It's not unnormal to think about how you want to off each and every one of them by about show 16, where you're like, I'm gonna smother them all while they sleep.
Our bands are aggressive. I don't think any of us know how much each of us kind of secretly want to kill each other.
And that's good though. It's good for the lifeblood of the band. So I mean, that's the thing is a lot of bands can't make it past that because you have to hit the end of the tour. You have to take a break. You can't be still hanging out every day afterwards. You have to take a little bit of a personal break and then come back strong. And I think a lot of those bands, like you said, they burn bright and strong and they're done because they like their friends. They've jammed with them at band practice. They've played the weekend show with them. They're all boys. But then you trap them in a van for 40 days together, and they're like, I realize I fucking hate these guys. I don't like them as human beings. And then you really can't go back to being cool after that.
It's also the tension of being so broke, man, and having to sleep, having a seatbelt jammed in your temple and shit like that. It's not luxurious. It's not luxurious.
I always loved it, man. I mean, I got to be honest with you. Any traveling, the weird shit that you'd see in different states and different areas, just
dude. I think there's some charm to it.
It feels like it goes by so quick too.
Yeah.
It's like, oh man, it's over already. Come on.
I remember
I had to go back to home in my king size bed. Shit.
I forget what state we were in, but we were driving on the road and there was these giant Hollywood letters, okay? It was off the side of the road. They were lit up. It was enormous. I mean, some time went into making this giant sign. And it just said, Jesus is dead.
Damn.
And I think it was supposed to be like an important Christian thing, but like they were like giant Hollywood letters. But I mean, the whole sentence, Jesus is dead, and it was lit, and there was like spotlights on it, and we were in the middle of nowhere, and we're driving for hours, and all of a sudden we're like, what the fuck is this?
If
And
only
as
they
we-
knew how that sound.
Well, as we came upon it, we're like, Jesus is dead. We're like, we need to get the fuck out of here, man. I'm like, in the middle of nowhere, after an hour of seeing nothing, there's just a giant sign that reads that. I'm like, I don't know if that's like a good thing, a bad thing. I don't know. We need to go.
That's when you hear like the banjos start playing.
And
You
that's what
better
I was
turn it-
thinking, is I'm like, we are like in the middle. We need to go, guys. They're not going to appreciate a bunch of like devil looking death metal kids, next to their Jesus is dead sign. So it was definitely pretty crazy. We got some comments coming in. Awesome band. Absolutely love these guys. Such a great name as well. We have another comment here, says, miss cover art too. Kids these days will never understand. And I love listening. I'm not sure if you're saying you love listening to the band or the show, but either way, thank you. And we're going to give you a little bit more to listen to. So this time I'm going to go with Xavier. Pick between No Quarter Given or A Myriad of Misfortunes.
Let's do No Quarter.
All right, we got it. We're going to go ahead and jump into our second track of the evening, folks. If you're listening out there, we still got much more to unpack here. This is No Quarter Given by Nights of Malice here on Uncovering the Underground. We'll be right back after this. right, guys, we're back on Uncovering the Underground radio show, and that song was No Quarter Given by Nights of Malice, New Jersey death metal and deathcore band. We have been spending a little over an hour now just unpacking and talking about a bunch of fun topics and, content here. And obviously, we've been finding out who they are and, what they have done, but I want to talk about what they have to come. So we'll start with you, Xavier, and then I'll jump back to you, Joe. What it is, or what is it that you guys have coming up for us, as far as shows, as far as projects? What can we expect? Because I think anybody listening in right now is certainly impressed by what they're hearing. Now they want to know what they can look forward to.
Ideally, as many weekenders and tours as possible. We have stuff in the works with that sooner than later. And then obviously just going back to the studio, back with Carson and Grant as soon as we can. A lot of the stuff you heard, the last two songs you played are the direction that we're going in now. And we literally are like itching to get back and record more music already.
Well, and it's great to find yourselves, you know what I mean? And I think a band goes through a lot of transitions where it doesn't mean that you were ever not necessarily yourself or that it ever wasn't good music. It's just there usually comes a point, and it's different for every band. Some I've talked about this before as well. Some have found it from the get-go, and their original starting sound is their sound, and sometimes they've grown out of it somehow, and they lost their sound, whereas others take time to grow into it. And as I think from what your guys' biography said, and as is what you guys have said as individuals, you're in your sound right now, and you've now found what feels like home, and now you're just adding to it.
Yeah,
I think
totally
we definitely
true.
are now, and I think we have been there more than once in the past as well. Since we've done this so many years, and we've done it through so many growing phases in our lives at the ages we've been jamming together, that we found our sound, and then we've kind of reinvented our sound, and now we've kind of found it again. So I think there's a few different eras to what we've done. Some sound a little more natural than others, but this is definitely the most mature. I mean, everyone says that about their albums and stuff. This is the most mature. It's a cross between Iowa and Volume 3.
Oh, God.
But this is definitely the most refined and has the most expressive and artistic elements and stuff that we haven't really had the means to even explore before.
No, that brings me to a good point, and it made me think of a question I just want to ask just for perspective, purposes. What do you think is more important for a band? A mature and calibrated sound or rawness? And what I mean by that is you guys just made reference to Slipknot, obviously, and if you go off of Slipknot's original album or their original couple albums, much more of a raw sound than maybe their most recent album. All still great music, but there's different stages, or what do you guys individually, as is your perspective, not as a band, but as Xavier and as Joe, what do you find, and let's start with you, Joe, what do you think is more important for a band to have that raw grittiness that you're just like, damn, these dudes are dope, or that you grew into your music and you've now, really calibrated that as a band?
I think it's a little bit of not losing the willingness to take a leap into the dark and push the limits past what you thought was acceptable, really. And a lot of times you'll find you'll surprise yourself with writing and you'll impress yourself, and a lot of people receive it really well. Yeah, you're going to have people that don't like it or might not get it, but you're going to show people that you don't want to just feed them the same thing over and over again and give them. I mean, yeah, there's the bands that do well doing that, but I don't know. This is extreme music, an extreme genre. So, I mean, the bands that, stick with me are the ones that take it to the extreme and aren't afraid to just still be creative and still push boundaries. So I guess like, yeah, learn from your experiences and use that as like, I guess, being refined. But don't be afraid to do things that you aren't comfortable with is the most important thing for me, especially when I hear a band do stuff like that.
I agree. I think that's definitely something that's important, for a band not to be afraid to tread into the unknown, as we talked about earlier. I mean, it's okay to have the raw sound, but progressing and, fine-tuning it into something different is very needed, because stagnancy is the devil. I mean, if you stay stagnant, if you're not afraid to climb beyond the limits of what you've already achieved, then you'll never be beyond what you've already achieved, and what's the point?
Exactly.
Now, Xavier, what are your thoughts?
Rawness versus the mature building. I think as long as it doesn't sound like phoned in or like lazy, I can get on board, because I think there's a good middle ground between that passionate, aggressive, kind of almost like ignorant sounding recordings like old Slipknot was. But like, in my opinion, I think Volume 3 is way more grown than their first two albums, and I still love that one because it's just done well. Or like, you have the Black Dahlia Murder, where they've totally sounded like the same band since Unhallowed, and now they're on like their 9th album, and you know what to expect, but they're either always getting better or always doing like, they somehow just never get stale to me, But then there are band, dude, as soon as I get like a hint of, oh man, like it sounds tired, or like, oh dude, it sounds like nothing's gripping me on this, and it just sounds like stale, I like lose, I kind of get bummed and never can revisit that release. You know what I mean? Just a passion has to be gone.
It's interesting how that works, because you have bands that will continue to release very high quality content, but you just listen to it and you're like, I don't know, man. I just feel like nothing's changed. It catch my attention, even though it's very amazing technicality and recordings and quality. And then you have other bands, like you said, like the Black Dahlia Murder, where, if you go back multiple albums ago and listen now, they're the same band. They still have the same exact sound, but somehow each and every album they manage to capture your attention with the same exact sound. Yeah. And it's interesting how some can make that work and others just felt horribly at that. And where does that happen? Where does that, and that's why they call it the magic. Where does that magic come in? Where does they find? Because when you find it, you can keep it going. But if you miss that magical element, you can be a phenomenal band that no one really, you know what I mean? Trivium was one like that for me. They're still a phenomenal band.
Yeah.
When they first came out, I'm like, oh, these dudes are dope. I love them. Really cool sound. And then, I don't know, it was like they continued to write really good music, but I just stood back and I'm like, I'm just not digging it. And it's nothing personal against them. I think they're a great band. It just didn't do it for me. It still hasn't done it for me, but they're good.
I think a lot of it, too, is just like, so you might be great at being technical. You might be great at writing really emotional songs, but kind of just like, know what you're doing with that specific song or that release and just own it, like as hard as you can. Just own it and know what it is and just own it. I think people think, if you're being authentic, they'll see that.
Authenticity is a big thing. I mean, and it's not to say that people aren't being authentic. I can't speak. But there are times when you watch a band and for something comes out of the musicians that is beyond what another great band does. And like I said, you see that in certain musicians. And we were talking about Slipknot. One thing I see is Corey Taylor, whether it be old Slipknot, whether it be Stone Sour, whether it be his own individual acoustic, for me at least, he's always come across as a very authentic musician. Some people love him, some people don't. But I've always felt the love from him. Like you can see the love he has for performing.
Yeah, you don't feel like he's ever like running on a script or like, is
exactly.
trying to like emulate something, or he's just kind of being him and just doing what he does.
Yes, and that's it. And I feel like some people are like, we're big now. we have to play a certain role, we have to talk a certain way, we have to be a certain way. And then there's other people like, I'm just going to do me and I don't give a shit, you know? And
Exactly.
And as a musician for myself, I mean, I was in metal for a very long time. Funny, like I said, you guys don't know me that well, but on the opposite end, I was very big in the hip hop world for a long time, much bigger than the metal world.
Yeah, dude. Fucking love rap.
Yeah, rap was always my bread and butter. I mean, I was very good in the metal scene, but when I left metal, I actually started carrying on my rap career, and it blew my metal career out of the water. But, I was always just authentic to myself. I did very dark metal style hip hop, and when I came out, I never gave a shit if anybody liked me. I was just like, I'm doing what's authentic to me. I'm going to make a high quality product and be authentic to me. And if no one likes it, that's cool. If you do, great. And it caught on because people felt that. They're like, man, I can tell that you are fully in your own zone when you're up there. And I'm like, that's the way it should be. You should love with a passion what you do, because if you reach the point that you don't, you shouldn't be doing it anymore.
Yeah,
exactly.
That phoned in shit. Like, as soon as a band sounds like lazy or like they're doing something that they don't really want to anymore, dude, you could see it a mile away, man.
You do.
And it comes across in live performance too. Like,
yes.
Like bands that give the same performance in a room of 20 people and 200 people, like the same level. I mean, you're going to win people every time, whether you win one person or you win 200 people.
Yeah.
You have to show that in your performance too. Like, you have to show you're not there just for the crowd. You're there to show them what you're feeling when you're playing. And you just like, I mean, I kind of do that when we're playing shows. Like, if it's a really small turnout or if it's a really great turnout, I don't really look at the crowd. I kind of just look inward and think about whatever I'm playing, really, but just feel the song. And I don't know, I feel like people think it's more relatable, I guess, or that's what I think when I see a band playing in, like, even a small turnout, when they're just giving it their all regardless. I feel like I can trust their authenticity more.
Well, I think that you said it. I mean, that's actually, to me, I think it's much more important to weigh a band on how they perform in an empty room compared to how they perform in an absolutely sold-out venue. And people think it's the opposite. How are they going to perform tonight opening up for the Black Dahlia Murder with a sold-out venue and all these people, the nerve, the pressure, it's there. How are they going to handle it? And that's valid. But I look at it opposite in my brain. I say, how are they going to handle coming out to what they thought was going to be a great show and there'll be 7 people in the crowd? Are they going to just give a lazy performance? Are they going to half-ass it? Are they going to be pissy? Are they going to be the type that's up there and make smart jokes like, wow, what a great fucking turnout this is, and be salty? Or are they just going to come out and be like, what the fuck's up, everybody? Let's get it. And then go into it as if it's a sold-out venue and this is the biggest show of their life. And I
want to see you 7 people dead on the floor by the time of this show is over.
and the thing is that you get both sides. I have seen bands come out and be furious that there's no one there, and they were salty and they gave shitty performance. They still played. They still did their thing, but you could tell like they weren't giving it their all. They made smart remarks, and they were just like, let's get this done and get out of here. And then I've watched other bands, it didn't seem to faze them. They were like, what's up, guys? Thank you for coming out.
Yeah, so if I'm being honest, like that, sometimes, like, behind the scenes, amongst ourselves, like, we'll kind of say, like, oh, man, we drove, like, 3 hours for this and that, blah, blah, blah. But, like, when, a few drinks later and we're on stage and people are whoever is watching and liking it, as long as the 5 people who are watching are loving it, then, then it's all fine. That just actually happened to us on Saturday, dude. It was a great show, but it got pushed back. We didn't play till, like maybe, 11:15 or 11:30 at night, and understandably, dude, like everybody else was leaving, driving home and everything, but the people that stayed really liked us. So I mean, we still killed it. It was just,
I mean, I think you have a choice to win over 10 new fans or not.
Yeah, exactly.
And like, if all you think about is the number 10, or that's your issue, because you have an opportunity to win over new fans is all that should matter. It shouldn't matter how many there are.
And those 10 people can be like, yo, check out this fucking sick band to their 5 friends each and stuff. Like, dude, word of mouth, I think, is underrated marketing tool.
Well, we don't think in numbers, though, a lot of times, in the right way, I mean. Think of it this way. You're playing in front of 20 people. 16 of them love your music. You just gained 16 new fans out of 20. You're batting high. Yeah. You play in front of 200 people, and 15 or 16 of them like your music. Which is better?
It's true.
You know what I mean? You say, wow, there was 184 people that thought we fucking sucked. And 16 people liked us. And you get more of a thrill personally because you played in front of more people, but actually you've gained way much more hate and did yourself a discredit, except you played in front of 20 and you gained 16. Now you're batting high and you're doing good. So, you walked away with the same amount of fans, which is better. I guess we would all say as musicians the 200's better because I got a better high from it. But then you have to question yourself, why am I in this? Am I in this to gain fans? Am I in this to put out a good product? Or am I in it to ego stroke myself with some type of high from the crowd? And I mean, that's okay in its own way, but people don't look at it that way a lot of times. Is like, I need to play in front of the multitudes. Well, what if the multitudes hate you?
And a lot of times, too, it's like a slow burn, too. Like, you win people over time. You don't win everybody all at once. Not unless you're like a breakout single artist that, like, is a smash hit. But, like,
oh, yeah, dude.
Especially in our style of music, like, it's a slow burn. It's like a grind.
Yes.
And like, you win people over time and you build honest relationships with people in different cities over the years, and that's what gets you there.
Go ahead, Xavier.
No, I'm sorry. I was gonna say to Joe, yeah, our band is the prime example of a slow burn because me and Joe have been jamming since like 2009 or 10, and now maybe some traction is like finally happening. You can't get.
Yeah, I mean, we can go, to different cities and people show out now. And it's like places, our first time playing somewhere and people actually show up, which is awesome. Yeah.
And it takes a while to get there. And I mean, you play time and time again, and most people don't make it to that stage. But then someday, years in, you walk out on stage and every single person or half the crowd is singing the words to your guys' songs. And you're like, oh shit, they all know our music, man. And you're looking at your brothers on stage and they're knowing the guitar parts, and you watch some of the kids down in the front giving guitar fingers, but they're actually playing the parts in the air, and you're like, oh wow. You're like, these people fucking know our music and we're 6 states away, and then you're like, it's happening, guys. It's starting to happen. And that's what makes it all worth it. A lot of people don't make it to that stage because it's so much frustration. And like we said earlier, joking around, I mean, you just want to kill each other before you get there. So looking at the time, we have our last 2 questions of the show, and then I'll let you guys give a shout out to, whatever you guys want to highlight, anything else you think we should know about, where we can check out your guys' music at, and then we'll play the last song and fade out for the evening. But the last 2 questions that I ask every episode is going to be, if you had all of the time back that you've spent recording, practicing, rehearsing, playing live shows, all of it. So obviously in this case, all your guitar time back, Xavier, Joe, all the time playing drums, and any other musical instruments you might play or things you've done in music. If I could give it all back to you right now, poof, to put into one other thing only, what would it be? And Xavier, let's start with you.
And it cannot be related to music.
Correct.
Oh, fuck. It would be either a fitness type of lifestyle, because I've always wanted to get into it but don't ever have the time, or something with like an editor, a movie, like editing, piecing together like a movie or TV or show or something. That would be the thing I would pursue instead.
I like it. That's why I asked this question, because it gets to kind of know who you are as a person, what your other passions would be. So obviously something as a fitness regime or into editing, which are both very good things. Now, Joe,
those are 2 things I would love to do that I have never had time. Like if you heard me try to discuss editing or saw how I ate, you would see how little time I have to pursue that shit.
Well, it's good to know that at least in heart you would love to. Joe, what about you?
That's really hard to say, because in all honesty, I mean, music has been my entire identity since I was like a very young child. But I guess if it had to be anything else, it would be some form of craftsmanship, whether that be like carpentry or like some sort of like fine woodworking or things like that. Like anything you do with your hands. I take instruments apart and I repair them and I refurbish them, and I do tons of work on instruments now. I guess that's music related in some way, but to build things that are impressive or important with my hands.
No, that's admirable as well. So there's no wrong answers, guys. So I'm glad to hear what it is that you guys would have a passion for aside from what you're doing now. And I'm going to flip it to a completely different type of question. And we're going to go reverse order, and we're going to go with you, Joe, and then we'll go with you, Xavier. This question is a little bit morbid, and it's the last question I usually ask every week.
Oh, we love those.
And it's going to be, if this was the end of your life right now, you knew that you were within minutes of passing away, and you had the option of either A, spending it with your family in an embrace of hugs and holding one another, but you are not allowed to say a single word to one another. You're not allowed to write anything down. There is no communication other than the mere holding and touching, the closeness. Or B, you can see each other. You can say everything that you wanted to say to each other, but you're separated from a barrier and can't actually be with them in the last moments of life, but you can let them know exactly how you feel. What do you pick?
Definitely speak to them. I mean, unfortunately, I live a pretty far distance from my family as it is now. So, and I definitely don't call my parents enough, but, you know, just like that's the best thing I really have now. It's like, you know, my mom calls me and like I'm able to pick up because I'm not occupied at the moment. Like that's a really good feeling. So yeah, of course I miss like hug my mom and stuff, but just to talk about like everything that's happened, for sure, that would be it.
And I like that because you've kind of, as being at a distance, have learned that the verbal side of it is very important because that is what you have and what you've had to build off of in time. And that is actually the less common of the two answers, though I get a very good deal of both sides of the answer. That is the one you don't hear of as much, but usually there's a very strong and valid reason why people do pick the audible side of it. So, Xavier, how about yourself?
I guess because I already talked to my mom and my sister. My family is small as shit. It's my mom and my sister are like my immediate family. And my girlfriend, obviously. We talk regularly 24/7.
And your drummer.
Yeah, my drummer. Joe would be there, of course. I don't know. I feel like I guess hug, that last like embrace, I think is because like that, I feel like that is saying more. Like there's so many words there that are unsaid, and it's like the last, you know, I don't know, man. I feel like that act is a lot more than just speaking things that I've already told everybody so many times. You know what I mean? I think that last final like physical interaction is something that means I guess more than hey, I love you again, goodbye. You know.
Well, and that's what a lot of people do relate with, and a lot of people say that is, you know what, when I hold them, I can really express a lot more than just saying anything. I had a very interesting answer a few episodes ago. I believe it was Cthulhu Dreamt, one of their members. When I asked him this question, there was like 3 or 4 of them on the line with us, and he said, "I'm going to be 100% honest with you. I choose option C. Fuck them all. Me and my dog." He says, "Me and my dog are going hiking in the mountains till it's done." And I was like, I got to be honest, you're the first person to say that. He says, "Listen, my family knows I love them. I don't really care to hold them." He's like, "I don't need to tell them anything. They know." He's like, "So fuck them. I'm taking my dog and we're going on a hike in the mountains." And I'm like, all right, man, that's a completely different answer.
I just realized why I picked A, because I hug my mom and my sister and, you know, my girlfriend all the time. Like, literally, okay, I'll see you later, hug, bye. But the last time I really, like, hugged, like, you know, like that different type of, like, embrace hug.
Yes.
With my mom was when one of my like, first cat died. And we didn't say anything. It was just, like, this, like, breakdown hug thing, dude. And it was, like, very comforting. So I'm a strong A. I feel like that's a lot more I feel like that'll do a lot more in the last moments than hey, I'm going to miss you guys. You know what I mean?
A strong hug can be very powerful, man.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to hug it up. You guys need to hug it up. After
that.
your next tour, make sure the 5 of you hug it up. You know, give that strong embrace hug. Find that love for one another again when you get to the point you want to kill each other.
After we shower, of course.
After you shower, of course. Absolutely.
Nah, man. Nah.
Before you shower. Get it in. Really indulge in the love.
Get those pheromones.
That's it. Now, you know, we'll go ahead and finish out here before we jump into your guys' last song and let it fade out for the evening. You know, where can we check out your guys' links and music, videos? Give us a rundown of where the fans out there listening tonight can check you guys out. Anything else you want to tell us, and then we'll go ahead and play your last song.
Yeah, we have a link tree on our Instagram bio with like links to literally everything. So each music video that we've released, the merch store, every social media account we have, including like Bandcamp, Spotify, YouTube channel, everything is there. So it's in our Instagram bio, Nights of Malice. And then just click the link in our bio and you'll have everything right there, everything you need to see.
You heard it, folks. They keep it nice and easy. Instagram, Nights of Malice, Linktree, everything's in one spot. Nice and clean cut for you. So go check them out. Please check out their videos, their music, their albums, anything that they have coming up over the near future that they're going to drop. Go and see them if they come to a town near you, and just be the lifeblood that you are for underground bands like this, as I say each and every week, because that's exactly what all of you listening out there are. So thank you so much for listening in this evening, folks. Thank you for checking out this wonderful band. Make sure to support them. Click the like, share, and follow button and get them out there. If you have anything you want to see us do on the show, do differently on the show, anybody you want to see us have on next season, next year, any of that, drop us a line at celestialoddities@gmail.com. Again, that is celestialoddities@gmail.com. Or you can do that at the Uncovering the Underground Facebook group page. Or lastly, the Frater Crow personal Facebook page, which is mine. I answer everybody daily. You're going to always get a quick response, and I make sure to engage with each and every one of you. So don't be afraid to reach out. If you're just tuning in recently and you missed the beginning of the episode, please, after this is done, it will go from the live portion to a streaming option. You can go back and stream it from the beginning, or you can download it. So please do so with this episode and all of our past episodes as well. We got some great guests, great conversation pieces. And make sure you tune in for all of our upcoming episodes. We have April 28th, Carbon Stone. May 5th, Model Misread. May 12th, Aerocobra. May 19th, The Fall of Me. May 26th, we have a comedian coming on for the first time ever. I've never actually had a comedian on the show before. And we have Lauren Petrie. She's a stand-up comedian. We have the Renaissance Rock Orchestra coming on June 9th. And June 23rd is our final finale episode of Season 2. I've decided to do something different. All of you listening out there that want to be a part of the show, you can call in. We'll talk shop. So, no special guests. The special guests are you guys. Excuse me, I have a really scratchy throat this evening. But I do want to thank you, gentlemen, for coming on tonight. I'm losing my voice right at the end. And been battling a cold the last week or so I'm just getting over it, but my voice is just screwed. But it's been great conversation, great topics, and obviously great music. So we'll fade out with the final song, but thank you so much for coming on, and good luck to everything that you guys have coming up. Yeah,
man, thank you so much for having us, dude. Thank you for the kind words. We'd love to be back.
Absolutely. No, I'll certainly have a seat for you guys, and we'll bring you on either next episode or next season or the following one. I always like to get good guests back on the show again, and you guys certainly have a ticket with me. So we'll go ahead and finish out with this last song before I completely lose my voice. This last and final song of the evening, folks, is called A Myriad of Misfortunes, and this is by Nights of Malice, New Jersey death metal, folks, here on Uncovering the Underground. We'll catch you next week. Have a great night.
Thank